week early this year. And we have a great speaker lined up today. And I do want to invite all of y'all and actually request that any of y'all that have some availability show up for the lobby day at the Texas Legislature, which is April 11th. I believe that's a Tuesday. And right now there's several people that will be attending. I'm not aware of anyone from NT-Reg that will be attending, but I plan to sign up for it myself and attend that lobby day. And if anyone else would like to go, please talk to Rita Beving about it. She's on this meeting, and her email address, you can just email her, is rita.beving@gmail.com. And she will help arrange it for you. There's going to be a training session next Thursday in preparation for that lobby day. But it should be, actually, it should be pretty interesting, should be fun. And again, the more people that we can get to show up, the better. And let's see, there's a message now from Cyrus Reed.
Just saying we're involved as well.
Oh, yeah.
Reach Rita, reach out to me. We're a number of groups are involved in it.
Right.
And while the primary focus is really TCQ sunset, we're going to have secondary issues, including the grid and renewable energy. So there'll be chances to talk about different issues.
Okay. Yeah. And I mentioned to Rita this morning that most of the people that would be attending for NT-Reg or just NT-Reg members showing up as individuals to talk to their particular state senator, state representative would probably be focused on renewable energy, energy efficiency, EVs, and those kind of issues, as opposed to whatever landfills or whatever else they might be on the agenda. And so, Cyrus, I really appreciate you being here with us today. I know you're extremely busy this time of year with the legislature in session. And so I don't want to take up any more of your time than is necessary. So I will go ahead and give you the floor, and you can go ahead and make your presentation. We'll do the Q&A, and then you can leave, and then we will go ahead and continue on with the normal NT-Reg meeting after that. But I want to just be cognizant and respectful of your time. So why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Yeah, and am I able to share my screen? I think so, right?
Hang on just a second.
Working on it.
And I put together a presentation, and Rita can appreciate this. It's really cutting and pasting from different presentations and updating those. And I focused pretty much solely on energy issues because I know that's the focus of this group. So I didn't include things on, other things we work on like water and land conservation, just because I figured your focus is that. But I would be happy to share other presentations that go into details on those other issues, but I figured I should focus on electricity and renewables for this audience.
Okay, Cyrus, I think you can share your screen down at the bottom of the page. Okay. It should work.
Share screen. Share.
There we go. We see it.
And let me just put it in slideshow view. Can you all see that?
Yes, looks good.
Yeah. And so cutting and pasting. I didn't make this slide. Matt Johnson at the Lone Star chapter of the Sierra Club made it. It's when I do PowerPoint presentations, it's lots of words. He's good at pictures. So this is really, we actually have a weekly meeting with activists from around the state, probably similar to what Rita does for the North Texas area. And so we call it our Building Power to Win campaign, focused on the legislature, which doesn't mean we're going to win. It means we're building power to eventually win. We're trying to get more people involved. So that's kind of what our campaign is called. And you can see my cell phone, and I'll share this. I already shared it with Bill, but I'll probably clean it up and share it again. And you guys are, welcome to use anything you want from it. It has lots of links in it too. So what I plan to cover today, and I have about 30 slides, and I'm happy to take questions as we go along because some of the slides have lots of bill numbers on them. I wanted to do a legislative update, talk about some of the grassroots activities we've done and are doing, including the April 11th event, but also want to talk about some of the priority districts, particularly in North Texas, where y'all have members on key committees, and we'd love you to be talking to those folks. And then time for questions and answers. So, legislative update. First, I want to start with a reminder. I think you all, you guys are all sophisticated, politically involved, but just a reminder who the big three are. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick pretty much controls, and Rita can confirm this, pretty much controls the Senate almost, I won't say completely, but almost everything that happens. It is really hard to pass something if the lieutenant governor doesn't support it. And it's pretty near impossible to stop anything if he wants to pass something. And it's because of the way the rules are in the Senate. It used to be when Rita and I started doing this work that you could get a block of Democrats to block things and create leverage. He's changed the rules, and the senators have changed the rules that make that impossible. And then the two others, Dade Phelan is the Speaker of the House, from the Golden Triangle area, from Beaumont, Port Arthur area. I'd say he's less, because of the way the House works, he's less powerful than Dan Patrick is in the Senate. Also because there's a more even mix of Democrats and Republicans than there is in the Senate. But he certainly influences policy through who he picks as chairs, who he's put on the calendars committee. So he's very powerful. Then of course, Greg Abbott isn't directly involved in the legislative session, maybe on a day-to-day basis, but his people are there. He certainly influences things. And then ultimately, he is the power of the pen. He can sign things into law, or he can veto them, or he can use his leverage and tell people, I'm going to veto this bill, therefore making it likely the bill changes during the course. So those are the three most powerful folks. Just again, this is just basic background. Probably you all know this. I'm going to go fast. The Texas House right now is 86 Republicans, 64 Democrats, 57 to 42%. So that's that makes it hard for, if the Democrats are all locked together, they might be able to slow things down, but difficult. And then in the Senate, it's 19 Republicans and 12 Democrats. Democrats by themselves can't stop anything. They would need several Republicans to join them to stop anything. So in general terms, Republican leadership is not supportive of climate action, especially if you call it climate action. In other words, there may be ways to do things that are good for the climate, but that's not the lead. That's not your lead narrative, right? It's other things, creating jobs, saving people money, et cetera, et cetera. I think you all know this living in Texas, but the narrative we can use here is very different than the narrative they would use if I worked for the Sierra Club in Colorado or California, put it that way. And here's some just more reminders. Texas legislature is still mostly men, 127 men, 54 women. If our legislative leaders accurately reflected our population, it would be split evenly, maybe a few more women than men. So that's important. And again, I didn't make these slides. Matt Johnson made them, but I thought they were pretty good to remind us. And then, it is still a mostly Anglo white are the folks who control things, especially among Republicans. And then if you look at the entire legislature, if it was reflective of our actual population in Texas, we'd have more Hispanic legislators, more Latino legislators than Anglo. That's not the case. So it just gives you a sense of how the boundaries have been created in a way that tends to favor Anglos, whites. So big picture, in Texas, we are not in 2023 going to pass a landmark climate justice bill, a zero carbon clean energy goal. It's not going to happen, at least in 2023, but that doesn't mean we can't make progress on different issues. And again, if people have comments or want to stop me, please do. I wanted to, I'll share this slide deck with everybody, but we do have a pretty updated page on our website where we have our legislative agenda, and we put our testimony every time myself or anyone else from Sierra Clubs testifies. We put that written testimony up on our website. It does say we have a bill tracker. I'm going to admit something. We're way behind on getting that, the public version. I have my own internal version, but getting it into the public version, I'm way behind, and I'm about to show you why I'm way behind, which is, where are we in the legislative session? Remember, the last day of the 140-day legislative session is May 29th, which means we have exactly 60 days left, 80 gone, 60 to go. By Monday, it'll be 58 or 57. But this is a complicated chart. The important number is, whenever I created this chart, which was a couple days ago, there have been 8,349 bills filed, more by Democrats than Republicans. Probably the Republican bills are more likely to pass. So the Democrats will have a smaller percentage of their bills that will pass. But, it's an unbelievable number of House bills in particular, well over 5,000. But even the Senate bills are, over 2,500, almost to 3,000. So that is a record. I think Rita can confirm that we have never seen so many bills filed. And it's just, it means it's really difficult to keep up because there are just so many bills out there. And again, a lot of these bills will never get hearings. Most of these bills will not pass, but it's just hard. It's just hard for any organization to keep up. Even an organization that's pretty much solely focused on, water, land conservation, energy. It's just, there are so many bills, it's hard to keep up. I've got them tracked internally, but we haven't gotten into the public tracker. We're kind of doing it as bills come up for hearings, frankly.
Hey, Cyrus.
Yeah.
If a bill is sponsored by both parties, do you have a way to tag that, or how do you do those?
Well, so bills are filed by an individual, right? But a bill that's filed by an individual can have a co-sponsor. And sometimes you've got the same bill in the House and the Senate, and maybe a Democrat sponsors it in the House and a senator sponsors it in the Senate. So some of these bills, it says 8,350 bills. Some of them are the same bill, right? They've been filed by different people in the House and the Senate. So the actual number of different pieces of legislation is less than 8,350. There is a way to track it. If you go, for example, if you go to the free website, capital.texas.gov, I think that is, you can look up bill numbers and it will tell you if there are co-sponsors. And that is one of the ways to build support for bills is to get other office to co-sponsor or co-author, sometimes called co-author, depending, or co-sponsor the bills. So you can see it in our tracking system. You can't see it. You really almost have to click on the link to see the actual bill in the public database.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so quick up. I'm going to do some update on some bills, big bills, and the ones I'm going to start with are the only ones that really have to pass, and that is the budget bills and in some ways the sunset bills. And so the budget bill is actually two different bills. It's the bill for the future budget. So remember, we only meet every other year. So HB1 in the House, SB1 in the Senate is the 24-25 budget. And then there's a supplemental budget for this year. In other words, we have so much extra money, more than expected, that they've come in and said, okay, because we had more revenue than we expected, we can actually spend more within fiscal year 2023. So there's what's called a supplemental bill. And there's only one version of it. And the reason there's only one version of it is because the Senate already passed it. And it's now been sent to the House. The House Appropriations Committee has already approved these budgets in the House, and they're going to go to the House floor on Thursday. So Thursday is going to be a long night because there are going to be dozens, there could be hundreds, honestly, of budget amendments that House members will offer. There are no direct issues related to renewable energy, other than some language that says, you know, the comptroller will use training money to help train folks for the transition to renewable energy. And there's a little bit of money in SECO's budget, the State Energy Conservation Office, for you know, loans for public entities, you know, school districts, et cetera. That's always in their budget. They always have some money for that. But importantly for all of us, we worked pretty hard on both the PUC, Public Utility Commission of Texas, and the Railroad Commission, just to make sure they have enough staff, enough inspectors, and in the case of the Public Utility Commission, making sure they've got a new Office of Public Engagement and a new Office of Energy Efficiency. And when I say energy efficiency, it includes distributed solar, in my view, because that is a energy savings technology. It's saving, you know, it's saving the homeowner electricity by producing it on site. So when I say energy efficiency, I always include distributed solar as part of it. So that was an important victory. The other thing I'd say is I know a lot of you are very interested in the IIJA, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Fund, and the IRA, the probably ill-named but good Inflation Reduction Act. The budget doesn't include a lot of that money because the guidance for a lot of those programs is still written. People are still applying. It does, however, in Article 9, have a catch-all that says any state agency, as long as they inform the governor and the legislative budget board and they don't say no, can apply for federal money outside whatever they approve as the budget cap. So it's sort of an out for state agencies because they can't, you know, when they write the budget, they don't know what's going to happen with federal funds. So they do, if you're worried that we're not, state agencies aren't allowed to apply for money because it's not in the budget, you don't have to worry because there's this catch-all at the back of the bill. They still have to get approval from the, you know, they still have to let the comptroller and the governor and other leaders know, hey, we're going to apply for this money. But as long as they don't say no, organizations like SECO can apply for that money. They have to get permission, but they can do it. So that's important. The other group of bills, and let me look at my time just so, okay. The other group of bills that must pass in some way are what are called sunset bills. And I don't know, I assume you all know what sunset is, but a number of the key agencies for the environmental conservation community have gone through the sunset process this year. In other words, there's a sunset advisory commission that looked at the agencies, made recommendations. There are commissioners, which are senators and House members, that then voted on those recommendations. And then those bills have been filed. We've already had hearings on the TCEQ bills. We've already had one hearing in the House on the Public Utility Commission, and we've already had hearings on the Texas Water Development Board. So we generally like those bills, although we'd like to see them improved, especially for TCEQ. But they do have, I think, good provisions in terms of public transparency and just more staff, more resources for those agencies, which I think will actually be helpful for renewable energy and things like energy efficiency. So I want to talk about some of our priorities. We worked with offices, and when I say we because I directly, it doesn't mean I'm the only organization involved in writing those bills. I think you are all sophisticated and know that bills aren't necessarily written by the senator or rep or their staff. Bills come from ideas that lobbyists and organizations give to them, and then we work with them to, to help write that legislation. So we've got about 12 bills that we are big supporters of. And I'll say that only 2 of them so far have scheduled hearings, both of which are this Wednesday. So that's disappointing because we're already at day 80, and you would have liked to have a hearing already. It doesn't mean those bills can't pass. There's still plenty of time, right? 60 days is enough time to pass a bill. But it's time, the clock's ticking. So again, I think these are all good for renewable energy. And they're listed here, and I'm not going to go into detail because I don't want to take too much time. But we have a big bill that's been filed both in the Senate and a slightly different version in the House to raise the energy efficiency goals for the electric utilities. So this would be in your guys' areas, Oncor. We have very low energy efficiency requirements on our utilities. This would raise them. And you're thinking, what does that have to do with renewable energy? Well, remember, Oncor at different times has had, as part of those programs, incentives for solar. So those energy efficiency programs do include things like solar. So it's Oncor, CenterPoint, AEP, El Paso Electric, TNMP. There's 7 of them. The other 2 are outside of ERCOT, SPS and Entergy, and can't remember the other one. Maybe there's 8 of them, but they all have to meet certain goals. We're trying to raise those goals. I'll say we're in negotiations with Oncor right now about, how we're trying to raise their goals, as they say, by 6 times what their current goals are. Maybe we can raise them, maybe we can double them. So we're working on that. And then Menendez has a similar bill, but is focused on demand response. That would be less about solar and more just about things like smart thermostats and pool pumps, things where you can shift your demand. That bill we're having to negotiate with NRG. So we're working on that. And then Anchia has, who's obviously from Dallas, has basically combined those 2 bills into one bill. So he's got a mega energy efficiency demand response bill, which we love. He is actively trying to get a hearing, and they're also talking to, ACT and the folks who don't necessarily want to raise goals on themselves. The 2 bills that have a hearing this week in the State Affairs Committee that we like. One is actually an old idea that we worked with Anchia long ago, but now the Public Utility Commission has decided is a good idea, which is to actually create a Texas Energy Efficiency Council and make sure all the state agencies and utilities and some members of the public are actually coordinating and talking and trying to get the most bang for the buck with all the different programs that are out there. So it doesn't do anything directly, but it creates a forum for us to make sure that TDHCA and SECO and PUC and private and public utilities are actually working together and trying to increase knowledge about these programs. So whether they're solar incentives or demand response or energy efficiency, weatherization programs, that there's a one-stop shop for information for the public. And they can also look at how do we improve and increase these programs as part of that. So we're big supporters of that. There's a hearing this Wednesday. And then the other one is we want distributed energy resources like solar to be able to participate in the market. PUC has started a pilot program. This bill, SB 1699 by Johnson, already a hearing, and 3387 by Hunter, simply make some changes in statutes that allows the aggregation of distributed energy so that a company, a retail electric provider or other could come in and aggregate solar on Larry's house and on James's house, and then bid those into the market and provide either energy or ancillary services. And the bill also protects customers, so you guys aren't gouged in that process. So there's 2,000 megawatts of unregistered distributed energy on the grid, mainly solar, that isn't really participating in the market. So this could be the step. And there's some other bills that are similar that go a little bit beyond what these bills do, but these are sort of the basic allow this to happen in the market. Zwiener has a good bill that's about kind of speeding up the permitting in cities of solar and doing some other things that is kind of modeled on what the city of Houston is doing. I didn't write that bill, but we like that bill. Hasn't gotten a hearing yet.
Cyrus,
Yeah,
can I jump in here for just a second?
sure.
Those bills that you had on that previous slide, HB 3010 is one that we have, in this group, have been kind of focused on simply because that's directly in our wheelhouse. Because that's really related to residential or small business related solar installations. And it hasn't yet had a hearing. So how do we induce a hearing on that or try and get that to move forward, not just after all of them? And I guess that's my second question is, does it make more sense for any of us to come in and just focus on one bill specifically like HB 3010, or as long as we're talking to our state senator or rep's office, do we mention all of them on this page, or does that dilute the message, so to speak?
I think it can dilute the message. I think you can always share a sheet that says we also support these bills.
Okay.
But honestly, if you're going to be effective, I mean, I'm there every day, so it gives me the chance to go to different offices, talk about different bills. But for folks that aren't going to be there every day, I do think it makes sense to focus on a couple of bills. And I would definitely also call Zwiener's office and talk to Patricia, Zavala, or Isabel and say, we, this group in North Texas is very supportive of this bill. How can we help? And she can let you know, the first step is, has the office asked for a hearing, which is a process. There's a form they have to fill out. They have to identify who their witnesses are going to be, who the opponents might be. And I don't know in that particular case, I'm working more on the efficiency bills than I'm on that bill. So I would, and I'm happy to, check in with them. They know me pretty well, and Zwiener knows me pretty well. Obviously, we've worked a lot together to see where they are. But that bill was, I believe, referred to State Affairs, which is Todd Hunter's committee. And so getting some calls into the committee office and saying, we think this bill's important. It's an important contribution to creating more resources in the state that can come on faster than they would otherwise. I think that's the way to go. Call Zwiener's office, call the committee office, see who's on the committee that can be helpful. Like in your guys' case, on that committee, I think it was referred to State Affairs. I can check in a minute. You've got Chris Turner and Anchia, who would be supportive, and they can also help try to influence the chair, Todd Hunter, to give it a hearing. Because if you don't get a hearing, you can't pass a bill. That's the first step.
Right. But that's the kind of information we need, and we don't currently have is, that kind of thing of, well, these people are, on this committee and they can help, or these people will be resistant, whatever. But that's the inside, I'll call it inside information that we need.
Yeah. Well, if you like
helpful.
I have a whole section on that, so I'll try to go a little faster.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Because this this you can read in your spare time. You're not going to remember all these bill numbers anyway. But my point was, the basic point I wanted to make is, we've got some good bills that have been filed that haven't had hearings yet. And this is, Rita can attest to this. This is what's difficult in our job. Like, we've got plenty of good ideas. They've been filed. We've done our homework. But then there can be opponents to these bills that make it hard. So there's a great bill by Darby that would really increase the build out of transmission, which would help wind and solar a lot. There's some other energy efficiency bills, which are really about taking federal money and creating new programs. There's a good bill by Hernandez about weatherization for low-income folks and assistance, basically. And then she's got another bill on that's a little bit broader than the Turner bill on distributed energy resources. And then we've got a bill to kind of light the fire under Seco to actually adopt the latest energy codes, which would help reduce energy use. So all those are, Sierra Club priorities that we're working hard on, but we only have hearings so far on 2. I think we'll get hearings on some of these other bills, but we haven't had them yet, so working on it. There are some other, I'd call them pro-renewable clean energy bills. The 2 on the left side are related to geothermal. Those did get hearings already in the Senate. And again, they're sponsored by the Birdwell, who's the chair of Senate Natural Resources. I'd say these are relatively minor bills, but they help clarify the law so that we can get geothermal going, and make sure there's an agency that's overseeing the wells used in geothermal energy, especially for these closed loop ones. So those are important. They're not by themselves going to create geothermal energy, but they're clarifying the law and will help us get there, because geothermal is definitely is going to be an important resource going into the future, especially if they say we have some dispatchable energy requirements, because geothermal is actually dispatchable. And then there's a bill by Menendez that is about Seco being more active in seeking federal funding and then helping folks apply for that federal funding for electric school buses and solar panels on schools. There's also a bill that actually has a hearing Monday by Cortez, and if you read it, you might think it's a bad bill because it's about regulation by homeowners association on the installation of roof tiles, but it's actually a good bill because what it's doing is adding roof tiles as solar roof tiles as something that homeowner associations cannot totally regulate out. They have to allow it if it meets certain criteria, basically. So that we're supporting that bill, and that's up Monday. Now let me get to the sort of the bad news, because not everything is pro-renewable. There's some pretty, I think, damaging and scary proposals that are going to pass the Senate. And I say they're going to pass the Senate because the lieutenant governor supports them, and the chair and vice chair of the Business and Commerce Committee filed those bills. And some of them are already out of committee. So there's actually 9 bills in this package of what the lieutenant governor calls repowering Texas, like we're going to fix the grid with these bills. A couple of them we actually support. They're really about enforcement and better transparency in the market. Those are good things, but most of them we don't support. And the ones we're most concerned about is SB 6, which some call the Berkshire Hathaway bill, which is a bill that would require the Public Utility Commission of Texas to do a contract or RFP for 10,000 megawatts of backup gas plants, and those would be paid for by you. It would be on the ratepayers to actually build those plants. And the idea is they would not be used in the market on a day-to-day basis, but only be there for emergency. But every generator who's in the market has basically said, this is going to destroy our competitive market, because once those are built, there's going to be so much pressure to use them because they're paid for by ratepayers that people aren't going to invest in Texas. And so not only would we be building more gas plants, which is, by itself bad, but we'd be discouraging further investments in the market. And I don't actually think this probably affects renewables, but it's still bad public policy. And then there are 3 bills by King that are bad for renewables. 1287 already passed out of that committee, and it basically makes renewable energy companies pay more than other resources. They would have to pay part of the cost of transmission. 2014 is less bad than it was. His original bill ended both the renewable portfolio standard and the potential for RECs, renewable energy credits, which is a trading mechanism. He's put RECs back in, but it's still taken out the RPS. RPS in some ways doesn't matter. We've already met it, but if in the future we thought we could increase it, now it would be gone. The statute would be gone. But the one I'm most worried about is actually 2015, which says going forward in Texas, any installed capacity in ERCOT would have to be at least half dispatchable. What that really means is you're going to have renewable energy waiting on the sideline. So this wouldn't affect, solar on homes, but in terms of the big solar and wind, they might be waiting on the sidelines for a gas or storage facilities to be built just so they could come into Texas. And I don't know how it would work, but it seems like another way to put the kibosh on renewable development in Texas. The House doesn't have those exact same bills. They have, I'll say, a kinder, gentler versions of them. So I put those on the right-hand side. So the Hunter doesn't have a bill saying you, the ratepayers, are going to build gas plants. He does have a bill saying the state would provide low interest loans for dispatchable generation. Still, I think a bad idea, putting state money into the competitive market, less offensive than the Schwartner proposal. He also does have a bill that's similar to King's that says there's a 50% goal for natural gas capacity going forward. Renewables are already at 45% of our capacity, so that could again limit renewables coming into our market. He does seem open to potentially changing that, making it something different, but we'll see. And then he has a bill that could allow the implementation of the PUC proposal to create a new energy market in Texas, which would favor dispatchable resources. He does have some guardrails on it, so maybe we can make that bill okay. But those are the bills that are really concerning us in terms of the potential that they would limit renewable energy development and be expensive. Maybe I'll kind of skip. You'll have the slide deck. I think you all know there's a bunch of bills that are aimed at city preemption, trying to take away cities' rights to do good policy. Some of them are very, very broad. The ones we're most concerned about are SB 814 and HB 2127. These are really bad preemption bills, and they would affect lots and lots of things that cities do, everything from protecting workers to payday lending. They would also have some impacts on some environmental issues as well. But then there are some specific bills that are listed here that are focused on not allowing places like the city of Dallas to get too aggressive in their climate action plans or in trying to limit or ban lawnmowers. Some version of those bills, I'm afraid to say, are going to pass. I'm finding myself in the strange position of having to do some negotiations and trying to get at least some protective language in those bills. But, some version of those bills will pass, I think, unless there's a point of order. That's what we did last time. So I'm almost to my section about grassroots, but there are two really, really bad anti-renewable bills. The Kolkhorst one did get a hearing last week. I don't think it's going to move forward as is, but the way she wrote the bill, basically all renewable energy would have limitations on where they could locate, but also have to go through a permitting process at the PUC. So we don't have a permitting process in the competitive market, but this would create that only for solar and wind, not for fossil fuels or other types of resources. And then Springer has a bad bill that's about creating a tax basically on anything that's not gas. So basically making renewables and actually any resource that's not gas more expensive. So that has not had a hearing. I don't think, I'm not too worried about that one. So, and if anyone has any questions about any of those bills or thinks I missed some bills that you guys are following, let me know. So what are we doing at Sierra Club in terms of trying to get people involved? Like you said, it's important to have, I guess, professional lobbyists like myself or Rita showing up and testifying. I guess we're professionals, but it's also important to have people power and have other people showing up. So we've been doing lit drops, literature drops, and it's obviously mainly some of our activists in Austin because they're there. And just having folks go by with a one pager on whether it's about TCQ sunset or water pollution or fix the grid and energy efficiency. We've just been doing those drops and hitting all the offices. Generally only takes a couple hours to hit every office. And then those pieces of paper always have a contact, which is either myself or Alex Ortiz, who's our water specialist. And that way those offices know who to contact if they have questions. So we've been doing some of that. We've also been, and again, I'll share these slides. We've really been pushing the energy efficiency bills. So we have both a individual action alert on that. We've had over 400 action takers so far. And then this might be something that would interest your guys' group, but we do have organizational sign-on letter, which we're going to use. We've been using to get a hearing, but once we have a hearing, we'll also use it to show support for these bills in the Senate and House to increase the goals, which again helps distributed generation as well. We've also submitted an op-ed, and National is giving us some money to do social media ads on this because we're really trying to prioritize this. And again, I'll share this so you can go to those if you want to sign the action alerts as an individual or sign on as an organization, you can. And I'll skip this, but we're doing a lot on the plastic pollution along the Gulf as well, and we have some bills on that. But for this audience, I'll skip that. But we have an Instagram ad. We're getting lots of action takers, etc. We also, and again, I won't show it now, interest time, but we are doing. We have a YouTube channel, and we're doing legislative updates basically once a week, and it's usually Matt Johnson interviewing me or Alex about what's going on. They're short, couple minutes, but they give you a sense of what's happening. And we're doing blogs as well, weekly blogs. Let me talk a little bit about the priority committees. I think this is what's going to interest you guys the most. So this is all about, can we, individuals on committees, so individual senators and representatives, if they're opposed to us, can we move them to be more neutral? Or if they're neutral, can we make them sort of passive allies? Or if they're passive allies but aren't very active, can we make them active allies? And that's what we're trying to do with some key committees and key individuals. And so the committees we're really focused on, and you guys should be too, is State Affairs in the House is the committee for almost all things electricity related. There's some exceptions, but in general, that's the committee that you all should focus on. Occasionally, some issues go to energy resources. So things like geothermal, anything to do with the Railroad Commission. So probably geothermal energy or hydrogen could go to energy resources. Environmental regulation is more TCQ, but occasionally some bills for incentive programs through TCQ can go to that committee. And then natural resources probably isn't a committee that you guys would follow. That's more, water issues. In the Senate, almost every issue that we're going to talk about goes to business and commerce. Water is water. And then natural resources, again, takes up TCQ and some Railroad Commission issues. So some of these issues does go to natural resources. In the House State Affairs, Todd Hunter is the chair, but in your guys' region, Charlie Guerin is a conservative guy, and it is not pro-renewables in general. He is very approachable and can be spoken to. So I think it's worth reaching out to him. I don't think he's opposed to things like, solar on roofs. I think his concern is more about land, and I think he doesn't like windmills, frankly. I think that's mainly his concern. But then we have two allies on that committee in North Texas, Chris Turner and Chia. And Rita knows this, but when you say someone's an ally, you might think they're automatically an ally. You still have to talk to them and explain why you support something. Why? Because there's 8,450 bills that they're aware of or might not be aware of. And there's just only so many hours in a day. So you need to reach out to them or their staff. I know the staffs pretty well of those two offices. So if you need contacts, happy to give them to you. I'll skip natural resources because that's not a committee that you guys would be involved in. Energy resources, the chair is Craig Goldman. He basically does everything that Texoga tells him to do. But it's still worth talking to him. And then there's some other people, and she is also in that committee. And Doc Anderson, who's in the Waco area, is actually I'd say sort of a moderate Republican and can be spoken to.
Hey, Cyrus, I'm Texoga for folks who don't know.
Oh yeah, Texas Oil and Gas Association. That the House Energy Resources is in general about oil and gas, but again, they can cover some issues like geothermal, and even occasionally some energy efficiency issues will go to that committee depending on where those. So I spoke in favor. I didn't put this on the list, but I spoke in favor of a Darby bill that would require or authorize gas distribution companies to start conservation programs, which isn't something they can do it, but there's nothing in the law that says they can do it. So that bill actually went to that committee. So that's an example. And environmental reg, again, I don't think you'd deal with it too much, but Terry Mesa is on that committee. And then the rest of them aren't in North Texas, I don't believe, unless I'm forgetting somebody, Rita. I think they're all Houston or the Valley or West Texas.
And this is Bill Byram. I know Terry Mesa, so I can help if anybody needs to talk to her.
Yeah, and Terry is someone who is very much on our side. She is not necessarily super knowledgeable about some of these issues.
Right.
And again, that committee probably doesn't deal with renewable energy, but they do deal with things like incentive through the TERP program, which can be used for electric vehicles or renewable energy. So in a roundabout way, they do. And also a lot of those anti-city bills are going to that committee.
Cyrus, I'll just jump in and say that Landgraf is the chair of environmental regulation and is very pro-industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is accessible on some levels. He will talk to you. He will listen. He's a pleasant and respectful and polite individual. He's well raised in that way in West Texas, but he is generally not supportive of the environment. And then Senate Business and Commerce in the Senate is the key committee. Charles Schwartner from Georgetown is the chair. Again, well, yeah, I won't say what I better not say what I can say. He's generally a nice guy and is approachable. I wouldn't say he's certainly not pro renewables. But there's some other key folks, and Nathan Johnson from Dallas is an ally on that committee. I'll say if you're a Democratic senator, you are under tremendous pressure. You can't get much done. So I think reminding them of sticking to their guns and not, selling out too much is important. But sometimes they have to, make the deals they have to make. But he's got some good legislation we're supporting as well.
And then Cyrus, Senator Menendez is good on that committee.
He is. And Zafirine is on that committee. I didn't list everyone, but
Right.
Yeah, they're good as well. But he's the only one, I think, from the Dallas area on that.
Right.
Yeah. And then on natural resources, not a friendly committee to us. Brian Birdwell, who covers part of South Dallas County or South Tarrant County, he covers part of your area. He's more in the Waco area, but he covers part of your area. He is the chair. Again, he's a gentleman. He comes out of the military, very, very, very conservative, but doesn't treat anyone badly, as a nice, as a gentleman, but he generally doesn't agree with us on most issues. Kelly Hancock from Tarrant County is on that committee. Again, he's not a friend of ours. Doesn't mean you can't talk to him. But it is what it is. so this is just an example. Todd Hunter is in some ways the most important person for our work. And I say that because we don't have much influence in the Senate, and the lieutenant governor is going to pass the bills he wants to pass. But Todd Hunter is the person who can stop the worst bills, and also potentially negotiate them so they're less bad. But he's also the gatekeeper for some of our good bills. The bill you mentioned, the Zwiener bill, the energy efficiency bills, all of those, we have to convince him to allow the hearing, basically. Or he has to hear from enough members to know, we want this hearing and we want to pass this bill. So that's why working that committee, I think, is actually our most important task for good energy policy. I'll skip this. This is just sort of, this was for our Share Club audience, but it was, you know, about how you need to, in the community, meet with folks, letters to the editor, social media campaign, let folks in those districts hear the messaging that we want clean energy. We want things that help consumers, like distributed resources, like energy efficiency. I think that narrative, the narrative isn't necessarily about climate action. It's really about strengthening resiliency and helping people pay their bills, and also have resources, local energy resources. I think that's the messaging that we think can win with these folks, not stop the climate crisis. That's good for our audience, you know, to get people excited, but it's not the narrative that works over there. This is more just some things we're working on, you know, so I think I can skip over this. But you know, any of these are good ideas for you all as well. And then I'll just mention, as was mentioned before, the upcoming lobby day, April 11th. Again, the number one focus is on trying to get that TCQ sunset bill as strong as possible. Right now, it's kind of stuck in committee in both the House and the Senate, so we want to add some amendments to it. But we also will have some secondary goals like the good energy bills. And I know I think some of you are involved in the Citizens Climate Lobby. Larry, were you here for that? That was last week. How did that go?
Yeah, it was you know, we thought we pulled off something that we thought was pretty good. We ended up having 66 scheduled meetings, and it turned out 47 of them were with Republican offices. And so we were advocating for improved transmission to help reduce congestion, was kind of one of our general principles. And then also trying to get more people, more bipartisan action on the Energy and Climate Caucus, which I was going to talk about here in a little bit. But yeah, overall, it was real good, and we had a good time. Encourage everybody to go to the April 11th one.
Yeah, I think it's important for them to hear from, you know, regular people, quote unquote, regular people, that there's support for doing things on, you know, taking action on these issues, because they're mainly only hearing from paid lobbyists, and there's a lot more industrial lobbyists than there are, you know, public interest lobbyists.
I think it's also important to say, and this has been my personal experience, if you have a Republican legislator that you may not agree with on a lot of particular issues, and you may not want to talk to them, it's very important that they hear from you on these types of issues, renewable energy or climate, if that's your issue, because it gives them an excuse. If they don't hear from constituents, it gives them an excuse to say, oh, I haven't heard from anybody on this issue. So if you have a Republican, especially if you have a Republican legislator, make sure you have your voice heard. You know, they may not act on it, but don't give them an excuse not to listen.
Yeah, it's like when the lieutenant governor had his press conference, Repowering Texas press conference, he made the statement that Texans want these natural gas backup. They want to feel safe. I don't think any Texans think it's a good idea, and certainly no one at the hearing thought it was a good idea. But if they don't hear from lots of constituents, not from the Sierra Club, but just from regular folks, hey, like, we don't want an extra expense on our bill to pay for gas plants that aren't even going to be used and are just sitting there. We want the market to work. So I think it is important.
Cyrus,
Mention, go ahead, Rita, go ahead.
is that press conference Repower Texas archived on the TLO site?
It is.
So if folks want to go back, I'll try and find it and
Yeah, I can't remember the date. It was sometime in March.
I'll look for it. Okay.
I was there. I snuck in with the press, so I was tweeting while they were talking. I was aghast when I heard, when they laid out those 9 bills. I was like, man, 4 or 5 of these are really bad. But it is what it is. And we do have, I don't know if we'll have one this Thursday because of the training, but we do have a weekly gathering of basically conservation activists every Thursday from 7 to 8, where we kind of go over what's happening in the week, what's happening next week, how can they help. And again, I'll share these slides. And I think that's all I have. I put my email and Matt's email because, well, I'm the person along with Alex going to the Capitol every day. Matt's the person behind the scenes doing the social media and blogs and press releases and that kind of stuff, and doing the outreach to fellow citizens. I'm sort of stuck at the Capitol, running around like with a chicken without my head. Go ahead, Larry.
One question and then a comment. So what we found with trying to reach out to, at critical times on particular items or particular bills, the Senate is very difficult to get comments and stuff on the record. You have to be there. You have to, even if you're only submitting written comments, it's kind of a pain. But the House has got an online submission thing for, once a bill has got a hearing, that it's pretty easy for people to submit written comments. And so what we've started doing is doing these action alerts that are kind of modeled a little bit after Alliance for Clean Texas. But do you find that it's once a bill has a hearing that are scheduled, that using those written comments to submit online is a good way for kind of your average person anywhere across the state to get their comments heard?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good thing the House has done. I do think you almost have to still do a follow-up, like get those comments filed. Then I haven't tried doing this. Can you cut and paste them into a document and then share them with the staffers and say, look how many people? I mean, I think a follow.
What we noticed kind of during the interim is, and we were doing this for CCL, is we would encourage people to put their comments in, say which, who their House district member representative was. So that was on the record. And then would save a copy of that and then send that to their House representative as backup in there. So I'm going to paste an action alert in the chat, which is for 4811, which is Anchia's energy efficiency bill that we've put together. And I would encourage people to look at that. You can tailor it, take the CCL stuff out if you're not, from that bent. But I think that's something that once a bill is scheduled, you can then actually add comments online specific for that bill. And our little action alert shows you how to do that. So
thank you for doing that. That bill is important to me personally because we worked on a similar bill 10 years ago. And then I met with the commissioner of the PUC and I was trying to encourage her to increase the goals, the utilities. She seemed pretty reticent, but I said, well, at least we should be talking and we should have a website where any member of the public can. And she's like, oh yeah, let's create a council. And I was like, well, I've got some language to do that. So I just took language from 10 years ago and then, changed it to make it at the PUC. And they seem to run with it. And that's the bill that came out. So
yeah, that's where I think I was in one of the ACT meetings. Somebody had said that the the PUC actually hadn't written recommendations on it. I guess from your inputs. And so anyway, I'll put that in the chat, and people can use that as an example and a way to kind of test out the process. The other thing I wanted to mention was a comment is I'll put some links in the chat for the Texas Energy and Climate Caucus for people to learn about that. And then they have a companion nonprofit called Powerhouse Texas, which has done some pretty good education efforts. And one of the neat things they've done is they've actually got funding to get 6 fellows, energy fellows, to work in legislative offices. And they got 3 to work in Republican offices and 3 to work in Democratic offices. So, I think that's an opportunity to help keep forcing or bringing up this topic and getting more and more people up to speed.
Yeah, so as an example of that, having those new fellows in those offices has been tremendously helpful. As an example, Carol Alvarado, who's a senator from Houston, I wouldn't call her exactly pro-environment. I mean, she's a Democrat, but she's a pretty moderate Democrat in terms of those issues. But having a fellow in her office that we can go talk to, that can then hopefully influence the senator on her positions, have been very helpful. Just having that extra person there.
Yeah, I think we got to meet a few while we were down there earlier in the week, and then Patricia Zavala gave one of the featured speakers at our event, and so that helped people get a little bit more background on that. And that particular issue, I hadn't thought of, or hadn't thought of that kind of concept, but it's really been I think those fellows, placing them in the offices has really been a good thing. So thanks.
Yeah.
Cyrus, I had another question, and I'm speaking personally, I guess, and perhaps for a number of people here, that we are novices at talking to senators and reps, certainly in their offices. And I'm curious, and I guess a little bit concerned, that we might be putting our efforts into opposing bills or supporting bills that really we can't influence at all, one way or the other. And I'll use, again, just as an example, HB 3010, as we talked about earlier. If there's really no chance whatsoever that that bill is going to ever see the light of day, we shouldn't be spending a bunch of time and effort on that particular bill, or any bill that we really can't influence. But how do we gain that knowledge? Because we're not down there like you and Rita all the time, so we don't know who to talk to, who might be influenced, what bills we might talk about, or anything else. And I guess that's my concern, is that we spend our time and effort wisely to try and make the biggest impact that we can.
It's difficult, right? Because even those of us who are there every day, sometimes we don't necessarily know all the conversations that are happening between reps and senators and chairs, what deals might be made. Like, I'll give you a hearing on one of your bills if you support my bill. Those things happen all the time. We're just not aware. And so I would reach out to people like myself and Rita that are there more frequently, and we can go have those honest conversations with staffers. Like, it's easy for me to go to Zwiener's office and talk to her directly, or talk to Patricia and say, hey, what's happening with HB 3010? Have you guys asked for a hearing? Are you likely to get one? Is there any support for it? And they'll likely let me know, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think that's the way, if they come back and say, the utilities come out strongly against it, or the cities that comes out strongly against it, and there's no way in heck we're ever going to be able to move that bill, well, then I think it's still important to show support for it, because the rule of thumb is always, it takes 3 sessions to get something passed. First session, you introduce it, talk about it, maybe get a hearing. Maybe the second session you get it out of, you get it out of one, either the Senate or the House, and the third one you pass it because you've warmed down. So that's kind of the rule. So
that's not reassuring.
That it's a long, some of these are long-term fights.
Right.
And I'll just jump in, guys. It's Rita. I hate to say this because you all know I work on climate stuff with the city of Dallas, but I hate to tell you, but the climate bills have never had a hearing. Some of them have been offered by Anchia. Even now Mayor Johnson offered climate bills multiple sessions ago. They've never gotten a hearing. So there's no crystal ball on some of this. I know one chair is so mad at oil and gas. He said to me said to one of my friends the other day, I'm going to offer that quick take eminent domain bill of Rita's because I'm so mad at oil and gas. Unfortunately, he hasn't put it in a hearing yet, but I'm hoping he will. But I've tried that bill 3 sessions and it still hasn't gotten a hearing, but I'm not stopping, you know. But I think sometimes, and Cyrus, see if you agree, that if you're down during the April 11th lobby day, that sometimes it's best to talk about the bills that are moving between the 2 chambers, because obviously they are moving, and to try and influence what happens with those. And if there's a few more bills that haven't had a hearing, to talk about those. But to me, it's good to talk about the bills that are moving in the moment.
I think it's also good too to, you know, for just average citizens to make calls to the legislator's office, you know, a polite, respectful call that just says I support a particular bill, you know, or I oppose a particular bill. Because I think in theory they're supposed to count those calls. Is that right, Cyrus?
Yeah, they do. The other thing I was going to mention, and I think you all know this, that just because a bill doesn't get a hearing doesn't mean that the language from the bill can't go on another bill which is moving. So there are many, all of us have experienced many times where we thought one of our bills was dead, but hey, there's a bill on the House floor with the same that amends the same code, and it might, if there's a good relationship between the author of that bill and the author of the bill we're supporting, maybe they can get some of their language on that bill. So, you know, there may be, there may be another bill that moves that is the same section of 3010 that could be amended. And we can, that's the kind of thing you look at when bills come up on the House floor. We'll often just do a scrub and look at the codes and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we can get something on. So one of my ideas, for example, is if we can move the Energy Efficiency Council bill, maybe we can get some language on increasing goals, or at least a study or something on that bill, because that bill's likely to pass. So of course, if I get too aggressive, then I might tank the whole bill. So you got to be careful. But there are things that can be done.
Hey, Cyrus, it's Rita. I see some folks had a question about the EV bills. You want to talk about Nichols 505 and the other one?
Yeah. So is this the ones about the fees?
Right.
Yeah. So we have been told basically that some EV fee will pass this session. And the Nichols and Canales bills are the ones that are at an extra $200 or $200 for registering an EV, or I guess it'd be $400 because it's, the registration covers 2 years. So it'd be $200 a year. And that Senator Nichols and Terry Canales seem, and I've talked to both of them personally, seem dead set that is the solution to making up for the lack of a gas tax on EVs, therefore not contributing to road. So that is likely what's going to happen. There are also some bills that would create a pilot program to look at things like vehicle mileage as an alternative, but those would be just pilot projects. And there was a hearing on one of those bills. And sorry, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I didn't put those in the sheet because I just forgot to add EVs.
Nichols is 505 and Canales' companion is 2199.
And that
Yeah.
has a hearing, 2199 has a hearing next week. We are likely to go and say, we think that we agree that EV owners should pay a fee, but we think that fee is not the right fee, that it's too high, that it's not commensurate with the number of miles a EV driver generally drives. But I think those bills, will probably pass. And I've been told it's important to push back against those bills because there are others who would like the fee to be even higher. So at least creating some noise, that we think 200 is high. Well, then, because there are other bills that would make it 300 or 400, right? So
There's a, that is because it has a hearing. It is one that you can write comments on right now. So I submitted some comments and used my data as an example that said it would be 6 times higher for the miles I drive on my EV versus the miles I drive on my 30 mile per gallon car. Why don't you do weight and miles traveled when you do an inspection? Every year we do auto inspections, do that. So that was my comment.
yeah, and that's a good comment that we would support. I've told Canales and Nichols we would support $100 fee. That seems at least more reasonable, or what you just said. But we don't support the 200. But the Nichols is chair, Canales is chair. They have support. It's likely that's what will happen. It's not as bad as it could be, but it's certainly not good.
I want to remind everybody that there's a lot of interesting things in the chat. So look over at the chat to see lots of information.
It's on, okay. One of the things that the 505 doesn't address is that it doesn't affect plug-in hybrids, which is nice for me with my plug-in hybrid because I have gone 50,000 miles on it and only 10,000 on gas. So in the 6 years I've had it, I've only used, and I get about 50 miles to the gallon. So I use even less than a regular hybrid. in
Please
terms
don't
of
come and
security.
talk about that. That'll just make them add.
I was
Well,
gonna send
and
that to my, I was gonna send
and-
it to my, my representative, Mr. Goldman, and gloat that, ha, 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 I'm paying even
No.
less than a hybrid.
Yeah, please don't.
You don't want to gloat because King had from Canadian has HB 820 that his tax would be 200 on electric vehicles and 100 on hybrids. So be careful.
Yeah, actually, in my testimony to the Nichols bill, I didn't even mention that because I didn't want to really bring it up. But that's actually a good thing that they didn't include the hybrids. So,
Pardon
you don't
me.
need to say too much.
This is Mellon speaking. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Closer to home, there is a move to penalize solar installations in Denton, and the Denton Municipal Electric Company is behind it. What sort of efforts would you suggest to change their mind, short of, joining the city council, or someone suggested suing them?
Yeah, I
Your
think
comments.
somebody, Ed Soph, actually sent me some information about that, and I haven't had a chance to respond to him. Because I think he's on the the advisory committee or whatever, utility commission. My advice is to organize, right? Is to get solar owners to say what they want to do, or future solar owners to say it's unfair. I can't remember the particulars. Are they basically trying to add a fee on anyone wanting to put solar on that's above the regular inspection fee or something like that? Or
Yeah, something like that. I don't know the details myself.
yeah, we've seen this throughout. This is, for a while, utilities were being pretty kind to solar owners, and now we're seeing a lot of pushback. We saw it in the Pedernales Electric Co-op. They did an anti-solar provision. We made it, there's some organizing by Public Citizen and others, and they made it less bad than the proposal, but it's still bad. And we've seen it, one option, what the city of Austin did is went to a value of solar rate, which, I can share I want to say some point I did a white paper that talked about the different ways to incentivize solar and, mention like different options that might be better for the utility, like a value of solar rate.
Yeah, it just seems to be counterproductive for them. They want to take a load off it when solar's, in the summer, in the hot times. And yet they'll penalize, it seems like they're, fighting themselves. Building more generation when they could just use less. Anyway,
On a legislation point, somebody had proposed a bill that would take the 10%, for HOAs, the ability to, tell you where you can install solar, that take the number from 10% to 25%. Did you hear anything about that? And is it gonna get any traction or whatever?
Do you know who? I haven't necessarily read every bill, so sometimes bills escape me. If you know which one it is,
Yeah, let me find it here and I'll put it in the chat.
I hadn't heard about that one.
Cyrus, this is Dan Lipinski. I'm a PE. Matter of fact, today begins my 51st year involved in solar. What Larry's referencing is at the present time, an old HB 362 back in 2011 stipulated that if a homeowner's preferred direction for the solar panels produced 10% or more compared to the HOA's preference of direction for the solar panels, and all other conditions were met, then the homeowner prevailed. There's a talk of a change to that from 10% to 25%, which would then have HOAs imposing effectively tighter restrictions on homeowners that want to install solar, because it would give the HOA a much greater margin before the homeowner's preference would kick in. And I hope that made sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember that bill from 2011. I was part of those negotiations with various offices and lobbyists. So I remember that.
We've been advised that there's apparently some kind of a change that's attempting to be made to that would revise that 10% for the HOA margin up to 25%.
Yeah, it's HB 4455 by Deaya.
Yeah, so the good news is that's a freshman Republican who's filed it, and it's hard for freshmen to pass bills generally. It has been referred to the House Business and Industry Committee, but it hasn't yet gotten a hearing, which is good news. And there's not a Senate companion, which is also good news. So, and the chair is Oscar Longoria, a Democrat. It doesn't mean, he's on our side, but generally Democrats are going to be more favorable to renewables. And that's actually that's a pretty good committee for us, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Democrats and I guess 6 Republicans. So, that's a pretty good mix.
I would want to mention, and I put a link in the chat here. The
Texas, 4 Republicans. Yeah. So that's good news.
Yeah. There's a Texas legislature online for anybody who really wants to kind of better understand this. Go to that website. You can create a little login account and put alerts on particular bills. So that's how I've been trying to keep track of the ones that, are either good or bad as to when they're going to get a hearing. So you have to poke around a little bit on the website, but it's a good way to kind of track things and see what's going on and see where the committees. So it's capital.texas.gov.
Well, I've added that we're opposed to the bill you just mentioned in my internal tracker. So now
Great.
Thank you for letting me know I'd missed that bill. I mean, that's the thing. There's so many bills, it's hard to review them all.
Okay, if there are no other questions, oh, hang on. Spoke too soon.
This is James Ornstein. I was trying to pull it up in the chat, so I repeated what I put in there. So the first question was, and I say first question because I guess Robert's rules say you do things in rounds, so I get My first question was, is there anything related to special charges for distributed energy resources for transmission and distribution utilities? And it's sort of the opposite of requiring net metering. It's a follow-up to Encore's 2017 rate case, if anybody remembers that. And it's also referred to as a cost recovery.
So interestingly, Nathan Johnson has 2 bills on distributed generation. 1699 is the simple one that just makes it clear that we can have aggregated distributed generation compete in the ERCOT market, and they don't have to register as power companies, and retailers can help them and they don't have to register as power companies, and customers are protected, have some protections. But he's also filed a wider bill. I'll have to find the number, that is actually an AECT version of distributed resources that has some language we don't like about cost recovery. That being said, he hasn't actually moved. They had a hearing on it. A lot of people said we have concerns with certain sections. So he hasn't moved it. And he's working on a committee sub. So that there may be others. That's the one I'm aware of, but I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't other bills that Encore and Centerport and others have that I just, let me find the bill number. It's got a lot it's one of those bills that has a lot of good in it, but also has some concerning sections because Encore and them wrote it.
Cyrus, to that point, with regard to, industry associations that are maybe tracking some of these that are more kind of aligned with, North Texas Renewable Energy Group or Texas Solar Energy Society, would you, like Alliance for or Advanced Power Alliance, Texas Industries Association, Texas Solar Industries Association, are there some groups or trade groups that we should be trying to follow that maybe have some paid lobbyists who are around the Capitol all the time that we should be following or connecting with? Can you think of any?
Yeah, there's an association called TIEBA, the Texas Association of, Advanced TIEBA. It's a business association of people who like solar and distributed and storage. And then the Advanced Power Alliance is the other one. I think both of those are good groups. And they have websites, and I think they let me find TIEBA's. And Johnson's bill is 1212. Not saying it's a bad bill. I'm just saying it has some cost recovery provisions for utilities on distributed generation. And he's working on a committee sub. It hasn't gotten out of committee yet. And then Chia has the same bill in the House. But we haven't been supporting those bills. We've been saying we have stuff we like and stuff we don't like, and we want to work with them, basically. Texas, TIEBA. Texas Advanced Energy Business Alliance. Sorry, I couldn't remember their name. They're a good group to follow, and they work on a lot of these issues.
Cyrus, it's Rita. Do you think on SB6, since we heard the Competitive Power Associates Group, I may not have that quite right, and some of the other generators, so against SB6, do you think they'll be, I know you've heard that the bill pass out Monday, but do you think that generators can get anything done on SB6?
I don't know that anyone can stop it in the Senate, because I think the lieutenant governor thinks this is the solution. The question is whether there's some other option that the lieutenant governor can say, I still got my way, and he can drop that particular proposal. So,
In other words, we'll have to do it in the House.
We'll have to do it in the House, yeah. I think nobody thinks they can stop anything in the Senate if the lieutenant governor wants it. He's got a lot of power. And the rumor is that he's gonna hold up the PUC sunset bill until he gets his way. So we have to convince him that there's a way that he can get where he still is victorious, but isn't this particular proposal. It's not necessarily my job, but I think it's the job of the competitive generators who don't like the plan either. It's a vendor bill. It's really Berkshire Hathaway that's pushing this. It's not, you know, there may be a few others. Now I've heard they're going to expand who can apply to do this to the river authorities and electric co-ops. So that's LCRA and STEC are pretty conservative groups that maybe would like to get a guaranteed rate of return to build some gas plants as well. So I think that's the rumor I'm hearing. So I wish I could be more positive, but again, I think Todd Hunter and the speaker are key.
Yeah. Yeah, we should rename them some kind of socialism, corporate socialism, maybe. Okay, well,
Hi, this is Lissa Megel. I had a question on some of the bills relating to dispatchable energy. How closely are they defining that? Is that like thermal generators only? Or could storage play if they had a 4-hour duration?
No, they're defining them broadly to be anything that's on the distributed network.
So
and-
if a solar plant had batteries, solar or wind, there must be some minimum duration they'd require, but
No, well, not in the definition itself. There are duration requirements in some of the services that can be offered, like ancillary services. There are some duration requirements. But in these bills in particular, they don't get into that. Now, there are these other bills that I didn't even mention that are part of the package that would add some ancillary services, but they're, at least in the Senate version, they're written in a way that favors gas and discourages the use of storage, because that's what the lieutenant governor wants, gas.
how do they discourage storage?
So the particular service I'm talking about is one of the bills, SB 7, and there's a version of it in the House as well, filed by Hunter, would create a new ancillary service called the Dispatchable Reliability Reserve Service. And we've said we're fine with that idea, but the way it's written in the Senate version, they require a 10-hour minimum duration, which is silly because the whole idea of this service is really just to have an extra reliability component when either demand goes really suddenly really high or the weather changes and so solar and wind drop off, or a bunch of generators go offline, you know, have problems. So it's meant to be sort of a little bit like the backup service, but it's generally, it doesn't need to last 10 hours. It needs to last 3 or 4 hours, right? It's not.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's a,
they've written a bill to solve a particular problem, which we agree needs to be solved, but done it in a way that limits who can participate. And it's to favor gas over storage. That's in the Senate. That they haven't done that in the House.
okay,
But,
thanks.
That's I'm trying to get Senator Johnson. I talked to his aide yesterday and said you should offer an amendment and tell the chair you will support this bill, Senate Bill 7, but they need to change the criteria for this new service, because the new service isn't a bad idea. You know, it's probably a good idea. It works within our market. There is a real concern as we get more and more renewables that if you have sudden shifts in weather, you know, people can be left, you know, kind of holding them back. So having some extra services is probably good. But they've written in a way to favor gas, which and it'll make it more expensive to consumers because we all pay for it. So
Remember these things when we go vote next time.
Well, I hate the idea of having a 10-hour requirement because right now it's hard to do, but eventually we're going to have to get there anyway if we want to have a fully renewable system. So maybe we put put the pressure on them now and say, yeah, you have to have 10 hours of capability at some level. May not be your full rated output, but, and try to get
Yeah, but
storage.
it's just, the problem is this idea really comes from the independent market monitor, Potomac Energy, and they said we need a service like this, and they called it the uncertainty product when things are uncertain. And they specifically said it needs to be a product for 2 to 4 hours, even two up to 4. That was the range. And suddenly they're changing sort of the definition of it to be something that's more than you need. So it doesn't actually make sense. I get your point. Like ultimately we do need 10-hour batteries, but not for this service. So
When we get to 70 or 80% zero emissions, then let's revisit it then.
Right.
You know, Cyrus, this is Dan Lipinski. You could look at the storage-based systems as an immediate startup, while the thermal systems based on natural gas have a time to ramp up also. So
yeah,
they
and
can
that
be apart
was
in both cases.
That was exactly the point that one of the lobbyists made the other night in State Affairs was you could create a stack system, because we do that in other services where you say, you know, the first 1,000 megawatts you need is served by storage because it's fast, and that allows the gas to come on, you know, 2 hours later. And then they take over. So yeah, exactly right. But
If at all.
you
I
can't
mean,
do
under
that. Yeah.
Under
you
the
can't-
circumstances, you may find many instances where it's only peaking power needed and you don't even have to fire up the thermal plants.
Exactly, but that's if we weren't allowing politics to get involved.
Oh, I agree.
So,
We have to stop talking about diversity and energy supply too, because diversity is a bad word.
Right. Okay,
Those of us
well,
online-
oh,
I'm sorry, those of us online didn't
Go
hear
ahead.
that last comment. This is Rosa Ornstein, sorry.
Oh, it was a cynical comment about we have to stop talking about diversity of energy supply also, because diversity is becoming a bad word.
Yes, you will openly hear in hearings the phrase, oh, ESG this and ESG that, blah, blah, blah.
I woke up this morning. Woke.
Okay, so question round 2. Where does the King 2015 or anything similar draw the line as to the size of solar and storage affected? So you implied that it's not going to go down to the distributed generation residential solar rooftop. I'm kind of concerned with what I would call community scale, which is like 100 kilowatts to maybe 2 megawatts, generally installed at the distribution level.
yeah, I have to look at the bill again. I thought it was for transmission resources, but I can look at the bill again. I don't, the version that the initial version was replaced with a different version. And it got out last Thursday. So I don't even know. Yeah, I got the committee sub here. Senate proposed language. Okay. It's now a 6-page. It's already placed on, it's coming up. It's not going to come up Monday because it's first placement. This could be voted on Tuesday. Here, I'll just read it. It is the intent of the legislature that 50% of the megawatts of generating capacity installed in the ERCOT power region after January 1, 2024 be sourced from dispatchable generation. The commission shall establish a dispatchable generation credits trading program. So it doesn't really say, you're right, it doesn't really say, although because the credit trading program is for power generation companies, utilities and electric co-ops, my guess is this is more focused on transmission level stuff. But you're right, the bill doesn't actually say whether it's It doesn't define what a dispatchable generation is.
When dispatchable generation doesn't come online or drops offline, do they have penalties that they have to pay?
It depends if they say they're going to be online and providing an ancillary service, yes. There are penalties.
Okay.
But this is just about the market. This isn't. Dispatchable generation means generating technologies other than technologies considered non-dispatchable. Yeah, so I don't know the answer to your question. It never talks about distributed though. Man, I have to write a new version of this and get some senator to do an amendment. This is bad. Be good to get some questions on that though on the Senate floor. Does this any way affect distributed generation?
I guess I'd heard it recommended that you never bring anything up because they're gonna turn it around and use it against you.
Yeah, unless I mean, King might like distributed generation and say, yeah, no, yeah, he could say, yeah, all distributed generation has to be at least half gas or half storage and gas or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, are there any more questions? Nope. All right. Well, Cyrus, again, we very much appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to give us this presentation today. It was excellent. And my apologies for not giving you a proper introduction at the start of this whole thing. I kind of thought most people know you professionally, if not personally. So, but we appreciate you spending time with us, and it was a great presentation. Hopefully, we will see you down there on lobby
be there.
day. Okay, and hopefully a number of us will be down there as well. I'll send an email that Rita resent to me today about lobby day. I lost the first one she sent to me, and I will send it out to the entire group and try and get as many volunteers for that as we can out of this group. And we'll do what we can. And maybe if you and Rita can or Rita can provide us some kind of list of direction on who we can talk to specifically related to the bills that we are going to be pushing on and most interested in, including, if there's just no chance, well, then let's don't waste our time on those bills. Let's focus on the ones that we do have a chance on.
Guys, it's Rita. Let
Yeah.
me just mention this, and this is the reason why I keep saying email me. I already have one team scheduled with some key people that are on environmental regulation and business and commerce. Nathan Johnson, Terry Mesa, and Chia, and some other legislators. And I'm also trying to get appointments with West and others. So we are hitting not only committee people in the committees we want, but also reps and senators that you guys may be in the district. So I'll re-forward that email to you, Mark. And I just want to say something about Cyrus. Cyrus is probably the most influential lobbyist at the Capitol on our side. And he is usually invited to testify at hearings, and you don't get invited to testify if they don't feel you know your stuff. So I just want to say that about Cyrus, who I consider a dear friend.
Thank you, Cyrus.
That's very sweet. I wish I was not only respected, but had more influence in the outcomes. of some of these issues. I'd rather not be respected and win, but you know, whatever.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, Cyrus, for a great presentation.
yes, thank you.
And I noticed that you sent me an updated one here later today.
Yeah,
as
and
well.
let me update it a little more and add
Mhm.
some of those links for the ACT stuff. And then I'll send it to you later today.
Sure, and I'll forward that to the rest of the group up here. We really appreciate it. We have a great interest in these topics. And it's just that our group up here wasn't exactly sure how to proceed, and you've helped us a lot
Yeah.
with.
And,
those
and I will
directions.
say, the legislative session is not the only thing to be involved in, and it is
Mhm.
hard to influence. And I think there's going to be a lot of work for all of you, especially on the IRA. I'm working on a letter now, which I'll be sharing with Rita and others, just to remind City of Dallas that they can apply for $1 million for climate planning. I'm sure they know already, but it'd be nice to have a letter with lots of people signed on. But there's going to be a lot of opportunities there to locally to, get federal money to do good stuff. And we might be more successful locally than we are at the state, speaking honestly. So don't feel like it's the only game in town, because it's not.
And there's a lot of cities in North Texas, smaller ones, that over 200,000 people that surround Dallas and Fort Worth, that also need to be getting on the right path to
Yeah.
renewables and everything. So
Yeah.
I recently, in working with trying to get solar permit for my house, even though it was incredibly difficult to work with the city of Irving, at the same time, the city of Irving's website is encouraging solar power. So it's like the inspection department doesn't know what the city's trying to do. I mean, it's like one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. So we really need to get with our cities and make sure that they are doing the right thing.
Yeah, and there are, and I don't know this much about this topic, but there are some good guidance that different organizations have put together of how cities can help prioritize solar. There's some best practices out there that we can share.
If you have any of those documents, if you could
I do
email
somewhere.
them
I
to me,
can't remember
or
if it's IREC or the Vote Solar. A lot of those, how do you put permitting online so it's easier? There's a lot of, best practices that can be shared.
right,
And
we're kind of interested in that.
NCTCOG has done some of that work too, right? NCTCOG is another good organization.
True.
Mhm. Right.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think we're ready to close.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Have a
Okay.
good afternoon.
Thank you. Closing it. Okay. And make sure we save the recording, of course.